Well, good morning. Today, our episode is going to celebrate my stepmother and my father. And we're going to go ahead and make a gluten-free bread recipe. And the interesting part about it is I'd sort of assumed when I talked to my stepmother that because it was a gluten-free bread recipe, that it would have gluten flour in it. It does not. It doesn't have any gluten flour in it. It has a variety of different flours that you can use, such as sorghum flour, millet flour, cornstarch, arrowroot flour, tapioca flour, and xanthan gum. And the really cool part about it is my stepmother sent me these wonderful, in the mail, these wonderful proportioned flours because she knew I probably didn't want to buy all of them. So we're going to go ahead and celebrate them today. And it was really cool to get this package in the mail of all these lovely flours and starches. So it's a really, really cool thing. The recipe is from Annalise G. Roberts, from her cookbook, Gluten-Free Baking Classics. And it is just basic sandwich bread. And I've had this many times when I have been with my stepmother and my father, and I have never made it before. So we thought, what a great recipe to make for those of you who are gluten-free, or need gluten-free bread. So today I'm gonna go ahead, though, I've got my Bake t-shirt on from King Arthur Flour. And just so you could see that before I went ahead and put on my apron. I don't know what I was thinking the last time when I was so intent on showing you my U2 shirt that I neglected to put on my apron, which is never a very good idea. So I'm going to go ahead and put my apron on. The significance of wearing the King Arthur Flour Bake shirt on is that the funny thing is how these videos started was a creative outlet to remember and think about my friends and family because I was missing them. And something that started out as musings has really become little love letters or missives to my friends and family. And so my dad and stepmom have spent a lot of time going back and forth and celebrating Christmases at my in-laws in New Hampshire. And they have said many times how gracious my in-laws are, and they go back and forth, and my in-laws have stayed with them. But some of our best memories together, and I think I've mentioned this maybe in episode 1, that we love to visit King Arthur Flour when we're out there, and we all end up coming out with a big grocery cart of a variety of different items because my stepmother likes to bake as well. But some of the other best memories were from a Christmas a couple of years ago, and it was a really stormy day when we were there in New Hampshire, and we lost power, and we were hosting. We were hosting at my in-laws, and my dad and stepmom were there, my in-laws, Chris, and then we were also going to have Chris's aunt and uncle come down. And we didn't have power. So, you're thinking you're going to have this turkey, and luckily we had a ham from that smokehouse I mentioned. But we were also making homemade quiches for breakfast on Christmas Day, and it is amazing what you can do in a grill. So we basically did quiches in the grill in the garage with the door open in this stormy, stormy day. We did sort of warmed up the ham. The turkey never made it that day. We had the turkey the next day because it's a bit of a slow go, and the size of perhaps it might have been the size of the grill my in-laws had, but we didn't actually have the turkey until the next day. But we seriously did the ham and made these quiches in a grill. And that was one of my stepmother's best memories, is the Christmases of things happen when you're, unexpected things that happen when you're together. And then we also had a very quintessential New England kind of experience where there's a small town called Chester, Vermont, that's not too far away. And they have this fabulous independent bookstore. It used to be called Misty Valley. It's now Phoenix Books. There are several locations. But they always have the most interesting, unique, just great books and diaries. And it is a fantastic bookstore. And we always, so did my stepmother, come out with a big bag of books when we leave there. And we visited not only Misty Valley, and it was decorated for the holidays and so forth because it was Christmas Eve when we went there, but there was also this great little antique shop where we met this architect from Scotland. He was visiting family, his wife's family, and just the stories. We spent quite a bit of time talking to he and his family, and we love going to the Meriden Congregational Church for a midnight mass. I love to sit next to my stepmother. I always make sure I stand next to her. or sit next to her when we're going to midnight mass because I'm a horrible singer. At least this is what my husband says. And she's a really good singer. She's in a church choir and beautiful voice. So I know that if I sit next to her, I can sing at the top of my lungs and it won't matter because she sings so well that she'll carry us both. So I get that kind of out of my system because I like to do that. But I use her as kind of my way to be able to sing loudly and proudly, because I really can't do that at too many other times. At least this is what I've been told. So we're going to go ahead and start making this gluten-free bread today, this basic sandwich bread. And a couple of things to note is that there are a variety of different ways and different flours for this sandwich bread, okay? We're going to do it a specific way with different flours and starches. The recipe talks about a variety of different flours and starches and combinations. At the end of the day, you want your starches and your flours to equal 2 cups in this particular recipe that we're going to do. I have gone ahead and sprayed a bread pan, a glass bread pan with Pam and a little bit of gluten-free flour so the bread won't stick. So I've gone ahead and done that already. You want to make sure your milk, or at least in this particular case when I walked through this with my stepmother, is that your eggs are at room temperature and your milk's at room temperature, because I have to get the milk to about 110 degrees, and she said if it's at room temperature, it takes about 30 seconds in the microwave to get to 110. So those are important ingredients. We're basically going to do our wet ingredients and our dry ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and start with our wet ingredients, and I'm going to just whisk the wet ingredients just slightly. And I'm also going to tell you as I go along some of the things that she gave me as helpful hints because she's made this bread before. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2 large eggs. I've had them sitting out at room temperature. Now, I usually do them separately just in case something's wrong with the egg, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and open one. These are 2 large eggs, all right? Put them in my bowl. That one was fine. The second one. Okay, 2 large eggs at room temperature. And then I'm going to go ahead and add 3 tablespoons of canola oil to this. I'm almost out of canola oil in my one container. So I'm going to go ahead and I brought up another one from my lower pantry. So we're going to do 3 tablespoons of canola oil. That's 1. Okay. And then top off. Okay, so I've added 1. I'm going to add a second one and a 3rd tablespoon. And I'm going to go ahead and just whisk that together. Let's say we're keeping our sort of wet ingredients a little separate. And this will be interesting later because, again, we have yeast and so forth, and we're going to keep these items separate again. So I've just whisked this, the eggs and canola oil, and we're going to go ahead and set those aside. Then I'm going to go ahead and put my flours together, which will be very interesting. There are multiple formulas, but for the first 2 items, for our first flours, we're going to go ahead and do half cups of each of these. So we're going to go ahead and add a half cup of the millet flour. And the cool thing about this is just experiencing a variety of different flours. So that's kind of exciting as well. So half cup of millet flour, then a half cup of sorghum flour. And you know, just to smell all these different flours too is pretty phenomenal. So we've got a half cup of our sorghum flour. Okay. And then we're going to change to a 3rd cup of the cornstarch. I can't imagine if anybody had opened this package up from the U.S. Postal Service and saw all these cornstarches and lovely flours, what they might have thought. I'm assuming because everybody's been baking so much, they would have known what was going on. But all right, so I've got a 3rd cup of cornstarch. You know, that's a little bit messy here. So okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and add a 1/3 cup of the arrowroot flour. Get that out. Okay, I'm going to add a 1/3 cup of that. And as I said, these flours are, or these particular flours are fairly fine. Okay. You certainly could hear that. I'm going to get some of these things out of the way so you can see. And then at the last 1/3 cup, I'm going to go ahead and do the tapioca flour. Again, it's just interesting texture for some of these flours and starches. But again, the point at the end of the day is to be gluten-free, so that's what we're trying to adhere to. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and mix that a little bit with my, my dough whisk. I do a lot of dry ingredients with this. I'm going to use it also when I'm doing wet ingredients, but you can do it, I use it all the time just to mix the flours together. So we've added our flours, the dry ingredients, and we're going to go ahead and go back to our regular part of the recipe here. We've mixed all the dry ingredients together, just so you're aware. So we're going to go ahead and mix the, 1.5 teaspoons of xanthan gum, which again is in this lovely little packet. So 1.5 teaspoons of that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add 1.5 teaspoons of my xanthan gum. All right, now we're going to go ahead and add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. Again, all dry ingredients together. I've got a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. And then we're going to go ahead, in this particular recipe, it talks about adding a teaspoon of unflavored gelatin. And Meg told me, my stepmother said that what she does instead of using gelatin is she uses just an egg yolk. Not the whole egg, but instead of the gelatin, we go ahead and add an egg yolk. So we're adding the egg yolk in place of the gelatin. And then I'm going to go ahead and add 2 tablespoons of sugar. Again, we're still just adding to our dry ingredients, even though I added the egg yolk. All will be revealed. So again, I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of sugar. Okay. I'm going to still mix this up. It talks about adding 1 packet of active dry yeast, and that equates to about 2¼ teaspoons. I've got this lovely yeast from the health food store. So I'm going to go ahead and actually do the 2¼ teaspoons of dry yeast. So 2¼ I've moved to a different set of measuring spoons instead of my lovely ones because they got a bit wet because of the canola oil and some of the other wet ingredients. So I'm going to go ahead and do 2¼ teaspoons of my active dry yeast. This smells so good. 2¼ Okay, got the 2¼ of active dry yeast. And then we're going to go ahead and put in, now just pay attention to this a little bit because it's slightly different than some recipes I've seen. It has 3/4 cup plus 2 tablespoons of milk at 110 degrees. So it's the 2 tablespoons that we're adding to the 3/4 milk that I wanted you to particularly pay attention to. And what we're going to go ahead and do is the milk has been at room temperature, and I'm going to put it in the microwave for about 30 seconds. It'll end up being around 110 degrees, and we'll add that to our mixture. I've gone ahead and warmed up my milk. It's about 110 degrees, but I'm actually going to take my more dry ingredients. It does have the egg yolk in it. I'm going to go ahead and take it to my KitchenAid mixer. I'm going to mix this for a little bit, and then I'm going to add my eggs and canola that I mixed up. You saw me whisk earlier, and then I'm going to add my milk to that mixture, and then we're going to end up going ahead and putting it in the bread pan. So instead of having you watch me do that, I will go ahead and do that, and I will see you after that is done. I have mixed up my dry ingredients and my wet ingredients, and as soon as you put the wet ingredients in, you do that for just a little bit to get them started, and then you beat on high for about 3 minutes for activation. So we've done that. It's lovely. At first I thought, wow, this is a pretty wet dough, but after 3 minutes of being on high, it actually held up really well. So it's kind of the consistency you're really looking for. So we're going to go ahead and put that in our lovely bread pan. Again, I think I told you it needs to be buttered with a little bit of flour so it won't stick. So we're going to go ahead and get all of that those lovely flours in our bread pan. Smooth it out. And I've got the oven going at 400 degrees preheating. I'm going to go ahead and put a tea towel over this bread, sit it on top of the oven while it's preheating, and let it rise for about 45 minutes. Then I'm going to turn down the oven to 375 and bake this for 45 minutes. So we've kind of got a 40 to 45 minute rise, and then we're going to go ahead and bake it. But that's only, we're starting it out, we're preheating it at 400 degrees, but we're not baking it at 400. We're actually going to bake it at 375 for 45 minutes. So I'm going to go ahead and start this rising for 45 minutes, and then we'll get it in the oven. I wanted to tell you what I've been reading this weekend, and it's very prescient for the times. I read this several years ago. It was the Michigan Humanities Read several years ago. It's Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel, and it was published in 2014. And the reason it's so interesting reading it right now, it also was a National Book Award finalist, I just see the little tab here in my book, is that it talks about a pandemic flu. Now this is all a work of fiction, released in 2014. Rereading it now is crazy. Just crazy, just based on what we're going through right now. Some of the scenarios of what happened, and it was based on a flu that was very contagious, and what was life like afterward. And it's basically, oh, there, you know, my preheating's done. Anyway, it's based in Michigan, but it could certainly be based anywhere. It's kind of between like Michigan, Ohio, Toronto, kind of that setting. But something that parallels sort of what we're going through that was written in 2014, as I said, is fiction, is very interesting to read it again when we're actually going through something like a very contagious novel virus. So very interesting. Check it out, Station 11, Emily St. John Mandel. Stepmother loves to talk about, and that's when she and my dad got married. They had a great live band, and all sorts of music from different generations. It wasn't specific to one. And we had multiple generations at the wedding, so it wasn't specific to a generation. So just really good dance music. And one of the songs they sang was the B-52's Love Shack. And the coolest part about this was actually that they let us, the family and friends, come up and sing at their mics. They had copies of the words. We got to go up and sing it with them. I mean, this is Love Shack, B-52s. It's a very fun song to sing out loud. And I sang loud for this as well because there were other people around me. I felt pretty safe. And my stepmother was the only one who had no idea what the song was. She'd never heard of it. She had no idea why all the rest of us knew at least even with the script, what the words were. And we're talking all generations. Everyone else knew what the song was except my stepmother. And she said, I can't believe I had no idea what this, I'd never heard this song before. And I have no explanation for how she'd gotten to the age that she was and had never heard of the B-52's Love Shack. But that's one of her best memories, is apparently the rest of us, all generations, and I'm talking teen, to 80s, everyone was singing that song except her. So just a great memory from their wedding, and being allowed to go up and be at the mics, and no one had shoes on at that point, so it was just a really casual, fun, sort of at the end of the wedding fun memory. Wow. I wouldn't have believed it. As I said, I have eaten this bread before. I have never made it. It rose wonderfully. You can see it from the sides, how beautiful it is after rising for 45 minutes. It's absolutely beautiful. It smells fantastic. And we're going to go ahead and get it in the oven where it will bake. Remember, I was preheating it at 400 degrees, but it will actually bake for 45 minutes at 375. You know, we talked about how important memory is and story, and how families or a best friend or whomever, you start intertwining and you gain all of these people in your life because of one interaction. There is a story really with Meg as well that has an overlapping story between my first best friend, Marcy, and our family, in that you gain people as you go through life, and that's sort of the beauty, and you start overlapping events in your life, and you just gather people. We used to, when my mother was still alive, my mother and father had a Class C motorhome, and every 4th of July, we'd go camping at this one particular campground, and it was near Sister Lakes, Michigan. It wasn't at Sister Lakes, and we would go and probably maybe have 3 campground sites, where it'd be my aunt and uncle and their children, and then my brother and sister-in-law and their children. And we would have like 3 campsites, and we'd go over the 4th of July weekend, and it was great. They had, there's always different fireworks around the area that you could go to. Our favorite was actually at Sister Lakes, where the Lions Park had these great fireworks, and you'd kind of sit against the hill, and they'd be shot out of this little valley or this courtyard and shot up, and it was just fantastic. You could feel it, you could see it, you could smell it. It was great. It was a great fireworks display, and Meg particularly enjoyed it and wanted it. That is a particular memory of Meg's that she enjoyed because she became part of that story. So after my mom passed away, my dad ended up getting a 5th wheel, and we would still go over 4th of July and camp at the same campground. And so generationally, we still had a lot of the family who had camped there as well, but then Meg was brought along with the story. And one year, Meg and my dad were there, and she remembers making this beautiful breakfast, and we did the fireworks, and my friend Marcy and my niece Krista were also there for the fireworks, and it's just a great memory of how these different generations and familial connections and friends overlap. We used to go to, there was a drive-in, not only a movie theater, but a drive-in where you could get a burger in a basket. And I'm sort of a fan because I have a memory myself of growing up with my mom and my grandmother going to this drive-in near where we lived. And apparently I'm very connected to anything that comes in a red plastic wire basket. So any kind of drive-in or drive-through that has that type of thing, I'm very wedded to. I don't know, but that's just something from childhood. And this Lutz's drive-in food place had the wire in a basket type of thing, and you could get a cheeseburger and fries and that type of thing. And we would always stop there when we went camping and so forth. And one of the memories too is that when there was a time at the campground, and they'd have their own little 4th of July where you decorate the kids' bikes, and the kids would go around the camp for the 4th of July, and they always had some kind of entertainment person, and it might have been one year they had an Elvis impersonator, and then one year they did karaoke in their large barn. And my niece and I decided, this was only the 2nd time that I'd ever done karaoke, and the first time I might have had a beer somewhere else when I was younger. Well, I did not have a beer for this. We decided that we would this plays into the Love Shack again, because remember I talked about the wedding, where this was the song that we all knew when we were singing. My niece and I said, oh yeah, let's do karaoke, and let's do B-52's Love Shack. It's an easy song to sing, karaoke, how could it not be? They're like made for each other. So there was a point in the song where I thought it was done, and I was actually because I'm introverted enough that really was not something I enjoyed doing and kind of a little bit freaked me out a little bit, I sat down because I thought the song was done. It was not done. It was just one of those long sort of pauses that they have. And it ended up being that left my poor young wonderful niece standing up there by herself with Love Shack still happening. Fortunately, the owner of the campground came out and sang with my niece for the rest of Love Shack for karaoke. Yes, that is a memory that will stay with me forever, as I'm sure it will for my niece. Well, I just got this out of the oven, our gluten-free basic sandwich bread, and it looks and smells fantastic. It had been in the oven for 45 minutes, and we're gonna go ahead and let it cool down. And it inspired me to get out some Garfield Smokehouse bacon and thinking about breakfast tomorrow morning with this lovely basic sandwich bread, gluten-free, and having it with bacon and eggs tomorrow morning, Sunday morning for breakfast with this lovely bread. It also makes me think of how lucky we are to be involved in certain events in people's lives. Meg and I were fortunate to be able to plan, with the help of my brother and sister-in-law, my dad's 80th birthday. It was a surprise birthday party, and my dad loves nothing more than to have people gathered around an event, food, whatever. He loves to have friends and family and all these different people from his life together. Nothing makes him happier. It makes him very emotional, and we knew that this would mean so much to him. And it was friends, it was also friends who helped plan this as well. Good friends of ours helped plan the flowers. It was people from all walks of life, family, friends, their friends, my friends, people from church, people they've both known all their lives. It was just a great interconnection. And it was for my dad's 80th, and he probably had 100 people. Were there at the event for his 80th birthday, and it was just absolutely wonderful to see the connections he had made in his life with people in my life. My girlfriends and friends were there. Couples' friends were there. Friends that they had all their lives. And so it was just great to see and plan and have this occasion to gather friends and family and all those intertwined connections and gather them all together for my dad's 80th birthday party. Well, good morning. This is day 2 of the gluten-free basic sandwich bread. And like I said, we're going to go ahead and have this with bacon and eggs this morning. I've got the cast iron skillet on the stove ready for eggs. The Garfield Smokehouse bacon's in the oven. And we're going to go ahead and cut this bread up and put it in the toaster. Now this morning, I have a Koshan Butcher shirt on from New Orleans. Thought it was appropriate since we were having eggs and bacon this morning. But Marcy and I were in New Orleans a couple of years ago. But I think this legitimately was like 2018. We were there in May. It was extremely hot and humid. You have a general idea of what my hair looks like on any given day. It's a barometer for the weather. I used the restroom at Historic Homes Tour in the Garden District. I looked in the mirror, which I don't often, and it was a fright. My hair was everywhere. It was crazy. So I decided when we got back to the hotel room in a manic state to use those, those little clippers or scissors you get in those travel manicure sets that don't really cut anything. I don't know really why they're in there, but I decided to cut my hair back here with those scissors because I couldn't take it. So I thought it would be completely unnoticeable later. We get back, I have my normal appointment at the hairdresser's, and he says, "What the heck happened back here?" He didn't use the word heck, but you get the general idea. For some reason, I thought, well, nobody will ever notice. I don't see what's happening in my hair back there. And he was mortified at the messiness and just dishevelment of my hair back there and me trying to cut it with those, non-cutting scissors. So anyway, besides that, Marcy and I had a fantastic time at Cochon Butcher. They're a great Cajun charcuterie restaurant in New Orleans, and you might have also saw them featured on Somebody Feed Phil. That's how we first heard of them. And we just had a great lunch there. Marcy and I have great memories of going to Cochon Butcher in New Orleans, a great respite from the heat. And I was just thinking about that and that funny hair story for some reason this morning. We're having bacon and eggs. I thought it was appropriate to wear the Cochon Butcher shirt. And we're gonna go ahead and cut up this bread. Again, it's gluten-free bread. It did fall in a little bit in the middle, but you know what? I'm not gonna let that concern me. I know from having had it before that it's just a delicious bread. And we're gonna go ahead and eat a small piece here. That is really good sandwich bread. You can see this lovely texture inside with all those beautiful different flours and starches that we use. And it is absolutely delicious. I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in the toaster, and we're gonna have it with our lovely breakfast.